Here is something that will happen to you the first time you land in Europe after a few years away. You will walk through a train station, Rome, Lisbon, doesn't matter, and something will feel slightly off. It takes a minute to place it. Then you realize everyone looks like they got dressed on purpose. Not fancy, not runway, just intentional. You will feel it again when you get back to an American airport, and you won't be able to unsee it. So, here is the question worth asking. When did Americans stop dressing for public life, and what exactly killed the idea that they should? Because the answer isn't laziness, it isn't declining standards, it's something structural, something that was done to public life itself. And once you see it, you'll notice it everywhere. It wasn't always like this. Look at photographs of American public spaces before 1965. Train stations, ball games, the beach. People are dressed. Not formally, not tuxedos at the hot dog stand, but with a baseline of intention. Hats, collared shirts, dresses worn outside as a matter of course. This wasn't wealth. Working-class families dressed this way. Factory workers dressed this way on their days off. The idea that you put on different clothes to enter the world was not a class marker. It was a shared norm, a quiet agreement about what public space deserved. That norm still holds in most of the world. Tokyo, Milan, Seoul, Lisbon. The baseline expectation exists, not as a rule, but as a culture. America had it, then lost it. But here is what actually caused that, because the fabric story is only the beginning, and the real cause runs much deeper than polyester. After World War II, American chemical companies were sitting on enormous synthetic fiber capacity built for the war effort. Nylon, polyester, rayon. Consumer clothing was the obvious market. Synthetic fabrics were cheap, easy to mass manufacture, and marketed as liberation. No ironing, no dry cleaning, no maintenance. That pitch landed perfectly in a post-war culture hungry for ease. The problem is that synthetics don't hold a silhouette. They don't drape the way wool and cotton do. They quietly lowered the physical standard of what clothing looked like on a body without anyone noticing it was happening. By 1970, polyester dominated the American apparel market. But fabric alone didn't do it. Something else had already started hollowing out the reason to get dressed at all. And this is the part of the story most people miss. When Americans moved into suburbs, they removed themselves from the public stage. The stoop, the sidewalk, the plaza, the corner. These were spaces where you were seen, where being dressed was a form of participation in shared civic life. A quiet performance of the fact that you were part of something larger than your household. The suburb replaced all of that with the car and the garage. You left your house, you entered your car, you arrived. Nobody saw you in between. Think about your own week. How much of it do you spend on foot, in public, among strangers who don't know you? For most Americans, the answer is almost none. You walk from a parking lot, you walk to a seat, you move through a grocery store in whatever you had on when you woke up. The continuous experience of being truly visible in shared space, gone. And when that disappeared, the social logic of dressing for it disappeared with it. Why get dressed for a world you never really stand in? Sound familiar? Drop the city you live in down in the comments. I want to know whether this maps to your actual daily life or not. Then there's what happened in January 1961. The American hat industry was substantial. Felt hats, dress hats, the kind men wore outdoors as basic grooming. John F. Kennedy was inaugurated, young, vigorous, modern, and stood hatless in the cold. He didn't personally destroy the hat industry, but millions of Americans watched modernity perform itself differently that day. The hat became almost overnight a symbol of the old world. Sales collapsed through the 1960s and never recovered. That's how fast a norm can die, not through argument, through a single visible signal that the rules have quietly changed. It happened again 60 years later, the Zoom era. Half the country spent 2 years on camera from the chest up, in whatever was below the frame. There's a reason the term outside clothes became a joke during that period, and then quietly stopped being a joke. When offices reopened, the wardrobe didn't fully come back. Another ceiling dropped and held. The mechanism is always the same. Someone performs the new normal publicly, and millions of private permissions get granted all at once. But the full unraveling, that took Silicon Valley. The 1990s tech sector decided the suit was a costume for people who didn't produce anything real. The hoodie became a uniform, a power move even. Casualness became status. Dress codes in American corporations began unwinding. Business casual replaced business. Then casual replaced business casual. Then the distinction between the two stopped mattering entirely. Levi's had already done the groundwork. Denim crossed from workwear into mainstream leisure in the 1950s and was acceptable almost everywhere by the 1980s. The line between work clothes and weekend clothes blurred, then collapsed. Athleisure finished it. By some estimates, the global athleisure market crossed $300 billion by the early 2020s. Pants designed for a yoga studio became acceptable in an office, on a plane, in a restaurant, at a funeral in some zip codes. The category of getting dressed had effectively ceased to mean anything distinct from not being naked. Here is what that actually costs. Not morally, practically. The mid-market American clothing industry, the tailors, the department store clothing floors, the brands that made affordable formal wear accessible is largely gone, killed by fast fashion from below and luxury from above, with nothing viable in between. When you remove the cultural expectation of dressing, you remove the market for the clothes that served it. And when that market dies, so do the skills, the local businesses, and the price points that made dressing well something ordinary people could actually do. The floor got comfortable, and then the floor was all there was. None of this means Americans should return to hats and girdles. The rigidity of mid-century dress codes carried real class anxiety, real gender constraint, real discomfort. Casualness has genuine democratic appeal, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. But there is a difference between choosing comfort and losing the concept of public intention entirely. Most cultures in the world still hold that distinction. A baseline, a quiet acknowledgement that the shared world outside your door might deserve a small amount of effort. What's interesting about America isn't that it chose comfort, it's that it stopped thinking of dressing as a choice at all. The traveler in that Roman train station isn't dressed up, they're just dressed. There's a difference. And that difference is really a question about public life itself, about whether shared space is a stage worth showing up to, about whether strangers, the people you pass in an airport, a grocery store, an office lobby, are worth the gesture. That question doesn't stop at the wardrobe. It runs through almost every corner of how American public life got designed, what we kept, what we let go, and what we quietly decided other people weren't worth anymore. That's what this channel is about. If that's the question you came here for, subscribe. Next video, we're looking at the American front porch, why it disappeared, what replaced it, and what that swap quietly cost us. See you there.